The galaxy had grown quiet since the Terran embassy opened on Kepler Station. For the first time in centuries, the great powers of the Galactic Council found themselves sharing space with beings they couldn't quite understand. Humans were small, fragile-looking creatures with soft skin and limited natural weapons. They breathed a common atmosphere mix and seemed pleasant enough in their diplomatic exchanges. Most species had dismissed them as another minor addition to the Council's ever-growing roster of civilizations. Zrakthor had different ideas. The Valkyrian warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. His 4 arms ended in razor-sharp claws, and his mandibles clicked with barely contained aggression as he watched the human delegation move through the station's central hub. The Valkyrians had ruled through strength for millennia, their empire built on the simple principle that the strong consumed the weak. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved hundreds of species, and established themselves as the most feared military force in the known galaxy. These humans troubled him, not because they appeared threatening, quite the opposite. Their delegation consisted of soft-spoken diplomats in simple clothing, scientists with kind eyes, and a handful of what they called military advisors, who seemed more interested in observing than intimidating. It was precisely this lack of obvious strength that set Zrakthor's instincts on edge. In his experience, any species confident enough to approach the Galactic Council without visible weapons or impressive physical capabilities either possessed hidden power or represented a civilization far more dangerous than it appeared. The Valkyrian intelligence networks had been unusually quiet about human capabilities. Oh, they had gathered the basics. Humans came from a world called Earth, possessed faster-than-light travel, and had unified their planet under something called the United Nations. But details about their military capabilities, their weapons technology, even their basic combat doctrines, remained frustratingly elusive. The humans seemed remarkably skilled at deflecting such inquiries with polite smiles and requests to focus on peaceful cooperation. Zrakthor's war-scarred exoskeleton told a different story than the humans' gentle diplomacy. Every dent and scratch represented a victory. Every healed crack marked another species that had underestimated Valkyrian might and paid the price. He had personally led the assault on 7 different worlds, watching lesser beings flee before his clan's unstoppable advance. The pattern was always the same: initial resistance, desperate defense, inevitable surrender, and finally integration into the Valkyrian Empire as either slaves or tribute-paying vassals. But something in the humans' behavior suggested they weren't like the others. He had been observing them for 3 standard days now, noting their interactions, their body language, their responses to various stimuli. The diplomats maintained perfect composure even when discussing topics that should have been threatening. The scientists asked probing questions about Valkyrian biology and technology with genuine curiosity rather than fear. Most telling of all, their military advisors watched everything with calm, calculating eyes that missed nothing. Particularly one human who went by the simple designation Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. The human was smaller than average even for his species, standing perhaps 1.7 meters in his standard-issue utility uniform. His hair was cut short in what appeared to be a military fashion, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had spent considerable time in harsh conditions. Unlike the other humans, who moved through the station with tourist-like wonder, Rodriguez carried himself with an economy of motion that spoke of professional competence. Zrakthor had observed many warriors from dozens of species. He recognized the subtle signs, the way Rodriguez positioned himself to maintain sight lines to exits, how his eyes constantly tracked potential threats, the careful space he maintained between himself and others. This was not a diplomat or scientist playing at being military. This was a predator wearing the uniform of prey. The revelation both excited and concerned him. The Velkarian way demanded strength be tested. It was not enough to assume power. Power had to be proven, demonstrated, and acknowledged. For 3 days, Zrakthor had watched these humans interact with other council species with apparent weakness, accepting slights and insults that should have provoked immediate violent response. The Thornakan delegate had openly mocked human appearance. The Zilani representative had questioned their right to seek council membership. The Moravian ambassador had suggested humans might be better suited as servants than equals. In each case, the human response had been measured, diplomatic, even gracious. They absorbed insults like sponges absorbed water, showing no anger, no wounded pride, no desire for retaliation. For any other species, Zrakthor would have dismissed such behavior as cowardice and moved on to more interesting prey. But Rodriguez's eyes told a different story. While the diplomats smiled and deflected, while the scientists maintained their polite curiosity, Rodriguez watched. And in his watching, Zrakthor saw something he had not encountered in over a decade of conquest. Another apex predator measuring potential prey. The station's central plaza buzzed with activity as representatives from 47 different species conducted business, negotiated treaties, and engaged in the complex social dynamics that kept galactic civilization functioning. Vendors sold exotic foods from a dozen worlds. Holographic displays advertised everything from mining equipment to vacation packages on paradise planets, and the constant hum of universal translators created a linguistic symphony of interspecies communication. Zrakthor made his decision. The challenge would be formal, conducted according to ancient Velkarian tradition. He would publicly question human strength, demand proof of their worthiness to stand among the great powers, and settle the matter through single combat. If they proved weak, as he suspected, the humans would withdraw their petition for council membership and accept protectorate status under Velkarian oversight. If they proved strong, well, that remained to be seen. He approached the human delegation during their afternoon break, his massive form cutting through the plaza crowds like a predator moving through tall grass. Conversations quieted as beings recognized his approach, some species having learned through bitter experience to give Velkarian warriors a wide berth. The humans, however, simply looked up from their data tablets and cups of what appeared to be a dark, aromatic beverage. "Ambassador Chen," Zrakthor's voice carried the authority of conquest as his translator rendered his words into human standard. "I would speak with your delegation regarding matters of honor and strength." The lead human diplomat, a middle-aged female with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, stood to greet him. "Warrior Zrakthor, how may we help you?" "Your species seeks membership in the Galactic Council," he stated, his forearms spread in what humans would not recognize as a formal challenge posture. "Yet you show no strength. You bear no visible weapons. You have conquered no worlds. You demonstrate no military might. By what right do you claim equality with those who have earned their positions through power?" Ambassador Chen's expression remained pleasant, but Rodriguez shifted almost imperceptibly behind her. Not forward, not into a defensive position, but into what Zrakthor's combat experience recognized as an optimal striking angle. "Interesting." "We believe," Chen replied carefully, "that strength comes in many forms. We seek to contribute to the Council through knowledge, cooperation, and peaceful development." "Pretty words," Zrakthor's mandibles clicked dismissively. "But the galaxy is not governed by pretty words. It is governed by those strong enough to enforce their will. I have crushed 17 species who believed as you do. Their pretty words became screams, and their screams became silence." The plaza had grown noticeably quieter, other beings recognizing the familiar pattern of Velkarian intimidation. Some species began discreetly moving away, having learned that proximity to Valkyrian challenges often resulted in collateral damage. Rodriguez stepped forward. The movement was subtle, professional, completely non-threatening by any outward measure. Yet Zrakthor's predator instincts immediately focused on the small human male with the intensity of a hunter sighting prey. There was something in Rodriguez's posture, something in the way he held himself, that suggested Ambassador Chen's diplomatic solutions might not represent the full scope of human capabilities. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps," the human said simply, his voice carrying none of the diplomat's careful modulation. It was flat, factual, and completely without fear. "Is there something specific you wanted to discuss, Warrior Zrakthor?" The directness surprised him. Not the content. Many species had attempted to stand before Valkyrian might with various degrees of bravado. But Rodriguez spoke without bluster, without obvious preparation for combat, without any of the usual posturing that preceded conflict. He simply stood there waiting, as if Zrakthor represented nothing more threatening than a maintenance request. "I challenge your species' right to council membership," Zrakthor declared formally. "Humans appear weak, unworthy to stand among the strong. I demand proof of your worthiness through trial by combat, single combat, as is tradition. Winner determines whether humans are accepted as equals or relegated to their proper place as servants." The silence that followed stretched long enough for Zrakthor to catalog Rodriguez's responses. No increased heart rate. The human's visible pulse remained steady. No defensive posturing. If anything, Rodriguez seemed to relax slightly. No obvious fear responses. His pupils remained normal, his breathing unchanged. Most telling of all, no consultation with his diplomatic superiors. Rodriguez was clearly authorized to make his own decisions in such circumstances. "When and where?" Rodriguez asked. Ambassador Chen started to protest, but Rodriguez raised one hand slightly, a gesture so small that most beings would have missed it, but Zrakthor's warrior instincts caught the motion immediately. Command authority. This small human male possessed command authority over beings technically superior to him in the delegation hierarchy. Fascinating. "The station's main arena," Zrakthor replied, his excitement building. "Tomorrow at midday, combat to surrender or death, as determined by the victor. Standard Council neutrality protocols apply." "Understood," Rodriguez nodded once. "Any weapons restrictions?" "None. Bring whatever advantages your species possesses." "I'll be there." The human turned and walked away, not hurrying, not looking back, simply moving toward whatever preparations he deemed necessary. Zrakthor watched him go with growing anticipation. Tomorrow would answer the question that had been troubling his warrior instincts for 3 days. Just how dangerous were these humans, really? As news of the challenge spread through the station, various species began placing bets through the underground gambling networks that flourished in any large gathering of diverse beings. The odds heavily favored the Valkyrian warrior. Zrakthor stood 3 meters tall, weighed approximately 4 times what Rodriguez weighed, possessed natural weapons, wore battle-tested armor, and had never lost single combat in over 2 decades of challenges. Rodriguez, by contrast, appeared to be an average member of an unknown species with no visible advantages and no reputation for martial prowess. The smart money was on a very quick fight.